You know, sometimes you hear about a crime and you're just
Yeah.
like, oh, wow, this is really going to be a tough one.
Right.
And this one, this story is one of
Yeah.
those, Sher Ray Rasmusen.
Mm-hmm.
She was young, successful,
Yep.
nurse,
Mm-hmm.
newly married.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like she was living just like the picture perfect life.
Absolutely.
And then one February morning,
Yeah.
1986,
Mm-hmm.
it all changed.
Yeah.
She was found murdered in her Van Nuys condo.
Sad.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
Signs of a struggle, bullet wounds,
Oh, wow.
and a bite mark on her arm.
Mm.
So this is the story of how this case
Okay.
that seemed like a pretty random act of violence
Right.
turned into a decades-long mystery
Yeah.
with a twist that I don't think anyone saw coming.
Well, I think what makes this case so fascinating is that it really reveals some of the pitfalls that can happen in criminal investigations,
Yeah.
especially this whole idea of tunnel vision,
Right.
when you're just focusing on one thing and you're not considering all the other possibilities.
Totally.
So the initial theory was a botched burglary.
Okay.
There had been some similar break-ins in the area.
Right.
And the detectives quickly kind of honed in on a couple of potential suspects.
Okay.
But the family never bought that story.
Yeah, I mean, they suspected someone else was involved
Right.
from the start.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, it's that the person they suspected
Mm-hmm.
was John Rutten's ex-girlfriend,
Oh, wow.
but she was an LAPD officer.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so Sherry had apparently told her family and friends about this woman,
Okay.
saying that this woman was harassing her,
Mm-hmm.
stalking her.
Wow.
And I mean, imagine how creepy this must have been.
Oh, yeah.
The person who Sherry thought was following her
Mm-hmm.
was described as dressing like a boy, but having these like intense,
Cool.
penetrating eyes.
Oh, that's creepy.
Super creepy.
Yeah.
That's scary. And I mean, this was all happening before she and John even got married.
So they weren't even...
Yeah, they weren't married yet.
Wow.
And John himself later admitted to having slept with this ex-girlfriend,
Still?
even after proposing to Sherry.
Oh, my...
So you can understand why the family immediately thought of this woman
Yeah.
when Sherry was murdered.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the classic love triangle gone wrong.
Totally.
So the family's pushing the lead detective, Lyle Mayer, to look into this ex-girlfriend.
Okay.
But he's convinced it's just a random burglary gone bad.
Yeah.
How could he have been so sure?
Well, this is a really good example of what we call confirmation bias,
Okay.
where he's already settled on an idea,
Mm-hmm.
and anything that contradicts that idea
Right.
is either downplayed or completely ignored,
Yeah.
which happens a lot in investigations,
Wow.
unfortunately.
So it can lead to disastrous consequences.
It can. It definitely can.
That is scary.
Yeah.
So the initial investigation stalls.
Right.
The case eventually goes cold.
Mm-hmm.
But then in 2008, something incredible happens.
Yeah.
What changes the game after all those years?
Well, technology catches up with the case.
Okay.
So back in 1986, DNA analysis was still pretty new.
Yeah.
But by 2008, it's a routine part of criminal investigations.
Right.
So the cold case detectives decided to take a fresh look at saliva sample from that bite mark
Okay.
on Sherry's arm,
Yeah.
and the results were mind-blowing.
Okay, break it down for me.
So they found that the DNA belonged to a woman, which completely busted that botched burglary theory wide open.
Wow.
And finally gave some real credence to the family's suspicion about John Rutten's ex-girlfriend.
All right.
But there's still one big problem.
What's that?
They don't know her name.
Wait, they know it's a female LAPD officer, but they don't know her name.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So how do they eventually figure out her identity?
They got to get creative.
Okay.
So they launched this covert operation
Mm-hmm.
focusing on female officers that were on the force back in 1986.
Okay.
They narrow it down to a few potential suspects,
Mm-hmm.
and one name just keeps popping up.
Okay. Oh.
Stephanie Lazarus.
Hmm.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Lazarus is now a respected detective working in the same building
Oh, no.
as the investigator.
Oh, that is super awkward.
Talk about awkward.
So how do they manage to get a DNA sample from her?
Well, they got to be really careful.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine trying to gather evidence from a colleague,
Oh, gosh.
someone who literally works across the hall from you.
Yeah.
So they eventually managed to get a discarded cup and straw
Okay.
that Lazarus had used at a store.
Okay.
And the DNA from those items was then compared to the saliva sample from the bite mark.
I bet those were some tense moments
Yeah.
waiting for those results.
Absolutely.
So what happened?
Well,
Was it a match?
it was a match, yeah.
Wow.
The DNA from the straw and the bite mark confirmed with almost absolute certainty that Stephanie Lazarus was the source.
Wow, so suddenly this seemingly ordinary detective
Right.
becomes the prime suspect
Right.
in a 23-year-old cold case.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a twist
Oh my God.
that nobody could have predicted.
It's like something out of a movie or something. You've got this veteran detective working to solve crimes and simultaneously being investigated for a murder herself.
Crazy, huh?
So what happens next?
Well,
Did they just go over to her desk and put the handcuffs on?
not quite. I mean, remember, Lazarus was a cop.
Right.
She was trained. She was likely armed.
Yeah.
And she worked right across the hall from them.
Yeah.
So they needed a plan to apprehend her safely and without raising any suspicion.
Oh, okay.
So they came up with this clever ruse, a fake interview. They told Lazarus that a suspect in one of her art theft cases had some information and wanted to talk.
Oh, wow.
Which lured her down to the jail.
Okay.
Where she had to surrender her weapon before entering the interview room.
Wow. So she walked right into their trap.
Yeah, pretty much.
Completely oblivious.
Yeah.
I bet the detectives were sweating bullets during that interview.
I'm sure they were.
So what was her reaction when they finally confronted her?
Well, the detectives start by asking some seemingly harmless questions about John Rutten.
Right.
But they gradually steered the conversation towards Sher Ray Rasmusen.
Okay.
And initially, Lazarus appeared confused, denying any significant interaction with Sherry.
Okay.
But as the interrogation progresses, she became increasingly anxious.
Yeah.
Her denials less convincing. The tension in that room, I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah, it must have been palpable.
Oh, absolutely.
It must have been like this psychological chess match.
Yeah.
Each side trying to outmaneuver the other.
Exactly.
So they've got her on tape talking about John and Sherry.
Right.
Did they confront her directly about the murder?
They did.
Oh.
They asked Lazarus point blank if she had ever fought with Sherry. And at that moment, I think the realization of what was happening really hit her.
Yeah.
She expressed shock and disbelief, claiming she was being falsely accused. It was a dramatic shift in the interrogation.
Oh, yeah.
Going from seemingly casual to a high-stakes confrontation.
What a tense moment.
It was.
So what happened after she left the interrogation room?
Well, the moment she stepped out,
Yeah.
she was met by a team of officers and placed under arrest.
Wow.
The look on her face was this mix of shock and disbelief.
Yeah.
Here she was, a respected detective.
Right.
Apprehended for a crime she allegedly committed 23 years prior.
Yeah.
It was a stunning turn of events that really sent shockwaves through the LAPD.
Wow.
And captivated the public's attention.
It's a story that really makes you question everything you think you know about the people around you.
Yeah.
But the story doesn't end there, right?
No, it doesn't.
What happened during the trial?
Well, the trial began in 2009.
Okay.
And it quickly became this battle of narratives. So on one side, you have the prosecution portraying Lazarus as this scorned lover fueled by jealousy and rage. They pointed to her diary entries where she expressed these really intense feelings of betrayal and anger over John's marriage to Sherry.
Yeah.
It painted a picture of a woman obsessed.
Right.
Driven to commit this terrible act to eliminate her romantic rival.
That's a pretty powerful motive.
It is.
What about the defense?
Yeah.
What was their strategy?
Well, the defense team had a tough job.
Yeah.
They needed to create doubt in the minds of the jurors.
Right.
And they focused on two key areas.
Okay.
The DNA evidence and the missing murder weapon.
Let's break those down a little bit.
Okay.
How did they try to discredit the DNA evidence?
Well, they argued that after 23 years, there was a high probability of contamination or mishandling of the evidence.
Okay.
They pointed out that the initial investigation was focused on a completely different theory.
Right.
So the handling and storage of evidence might not have met the rigorous standards we have today.
Right. Right.
So this strategy was aimed at sowing seeds of doubt about the reliability of that DNA match.
So basically, they're arguing that even though there was a match, it might not mean that Lazarus was the one who actually left the saliva on Sherry's arm.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the missing weapon?
Yeah.
Did they have any explanations for that?
Well, Lazarus had reported her gun stolen
Okay.
a couple of weeks after the murder.
Right.
a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver, which the prosecution believed was the murder weapon.
Right.
The defense, of course, maintained that this was just a coincidence.
Right.
And that the stolen gun had nothing to do with Sherry's death. You know, this missing piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Combined with the questions they raised about the DNA, formed the core of their strategy to cast reasonable doubt on the prosecution's case.
It sounds like a classic courtroom drama.
Yeah, it does.
You've got these two competing narratives.
Right.
And the jury's tasked with deciding which version of the truth to believe.
Exactly.
So what was the verdict?
Well, after a month-long trial filled with this dramatic testimony and intense legal arguments, the jury returned a guilty verdict.
Wow.
Stephanie Lazarus was found guilty of first-degree murder.
Oh, wow.
It was a major victory for the prosecution and a devastating blow to the defense.
That must have been an incredibly emotional moment.
Oh, yeah.
For everyone involved.
Absolutely.
Especially for Sherry's family.
Of course.
So what was the sentencing like?
Well, the sentencing hearing was a roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah.
You know, the Rasmusen family delivered powerful victim impact statements, sharing their grief and the profound impact Sherry's murder had on their lives.
Yeah.
You know, it was just heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
Testament to the enduring pain caused by this senseless act.
It's hard to even imagine the pain they must have gone through, waiting over 2 decades for justice.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
What about John Rutten?
Uh-huh.
Did he speak at the hearing?
He did.
Okay.
And it was kind of surprising.
Yeah.
He offered a public apology for his role in the events that led to Sherry's death.
Wow.
Acknowledging the pain he had caused both families. It was a moment of raw emotion and a recognition of the complex web of relationships that contributed to this tragedy.
So even after all those years, there was still a sense of accountability.
Yeah, it seemed like it.
And a desire for closure.
Yeah.
What was Stephanie Lazarus' sentence?
Lazarus was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison.
Wow.
You know, it was a sentence that brought a sense of justice and closure to a case that had haunted the Rasmusen family for over 2 decades.
Yeah.
However, her conviction also raised some uncomfortable questions about the LAPD.
Right.
And its ability to police its own.
Yeah, how could a decorated officer commit such a brutal crime and go undetected for so long?
Exactly.
You know, it challenged our assumptions about those we trust to uphold the law. It's the truly disturbing aspect of this whole story.
Yeah, it really is.
And it makes you wonder, what could drive someone like Stephanie Lazarus, a seemingly successful police officer, to commit such a horrific act?
Is the question, isn't it?
Was it a crime of passion?
Yeah.
A cold-blooded act of revenge? Or something else entirely?
Who knows?
That's a question that continues to fascinate and perplex.
It does.
This case really peels back the layers of human behavior.
It does.
Revealing the complexities and the contradictions that can exist within those sworn to protect and serve.
Right.
And it forces us to confront this uncomfortable reality that even those we perceive as heroes can be capable of terrible acts.
Oh, absolutely.
It's definitely a sobering thought.
It is.
So what does this all mean?
Well,
what are some of the key takeaways from this deep dive into the Lazarus case?
I think this case highlights several crucial aspects of criminal justice and the complexities of human nature.
Okay.
You know, first, it demonstrates the vital role of forensic science, particularly DNA technology in solving crimes.
Especially cold cases.
Especially cold cases, yeah.
Right.
The advancements in DNA analysis allowed investigators to connect Lazarus to the crime scene decades after the murder, providing irrefutable evidence that would have been impossible to obtain back in 1986.
That's a powerful testament.
It is.
To the progress made in forensic science.
Right.
And how it can be used to solve even the most challenging cases.
Absolutely.
What else can we learn from this story?
Well, the Lazarus case also underscores the critical importance of persistence and a refusal to give up hope. Right. You know, the Rasmusen family never wavered in their belief that Sherry's killer would be found, even when the trail went cold.
Yeah.
Their unwavering determination ultimately led to Lazarus's arrest and conviction, proving that justice, even when delayed, is still possible.
It's an inspiring reminder that sometimes the truth does prevail.
Yeah, it does.
Even after years of uncertainty and frustration.
Right.
But there's also a darker side to this story, right?
Yeah, there is.
What about the LAPD and their initial handling of the case.
That's right. This case exposes the potential for tunnel vision and confirmation bias within law enforcement.
Right.
The initial investigators were so focused on the botched burglary theory that they dismissed the family's concerns about Lazarus as unfounded, overlooking crucial evidence that could have led them to the real perpetrator much sooner.
It's a sobering reminder that even those entrusted with upholding the law can make mistakes.
Right.
And that sometimes the most obvious answer isn't always the correct one.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the broader implications of this for law enforcement and investigations in general?
Well, I think this case highlights the need for investigators to remain open to all possibilities, to avoid fixating on a single theory, and to thoroughly investigate all leads, even when they challenge the prevailing narrative. It's about constantly questioning assumptions, seeking evidence that both supports and contradicts their theories, and being willing to adjust their approach based on new information.
It sounds like a delicate balance.
It is.
Between staying focused on the evidence at hand and being open to alternative explanations.
Right.
Is there a risk of going too far in the other direction?
Oh, there definitely is.
Of pursuing every possible lead. Even if it's unlikely.
Absolutely. There's a real danger of getting bogged down in tangential details or chasing red herrings.
Right.
Effective investigation requires a combination of thoroughness, critical thinking, and intuition. It's about knowing when to follow a hunch and when to step back and reassess the situation.
So it's a reminder that investigating crimes, especially complex ones like this, is as much an art as it is a science.
Absolutely.
Are there any specific techniques or approaches that might help investigators avoid falling into the trap of tunnel vision?
Yeah, there are a few key things that can help. One is to actively seek out and consider alternative explanations for the evidence. Don't just look for information that confirms your theory. Challenge your own assumptions and look for evidence that might contradict them.
So challenge yourself.
Exactly. Another helpful technique is to involve multiple investigators with diverse perspectives. Having a fresh set of eyes on the case can help identify biases and uncover overlooked clues.
Those are some great insights.
I think so.
It sounds like good detective work requires a healthy dose of self-awareness.
Absolutely.
And a willingness to challenge your own beliefs.
Right. Exactly.
What about the role of technology in investigations?
Yeah.
Do you think the availability of DNA evidence has fundamentally changed how crimes are solved?
Oh, absolutely. DNA evidence has revolutionized criminal justice. It's become an incredibly powerful tool for identifying suspects, linking them to crime scenes, and exonerating the wrongly accused. In the Lazarus case, it was the DNA evidence that ultimately cracked the case wide open, providing the irrefutable proof needed to secure her conviction.
It's a testament to the power of science and technology to uncover the truth, even after decades have passed.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So what other technological advancements do you think will shape the future of criminal investigations?
Well, we're seeing some really exciting developments in areas like facial recognition, artificial intelligence, and forensic genealogy. These technologies have the potential to further enhance our ability to solve crimes, identify suspects, and bring perpetrators to justice.
It's fascinating to think about how technology will continue to evolve and its impact on the world of criminal justice. But technology alone isn't enough, right?
No, it's not.
We still need skilled investigators. Good old-fashioned detective work.
Absolutely.
And a commitment to seeking the truth.
Couldn't agree more.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Lazarus case, what are some of the lasting impacts of this story on the LAPD? On the public's perception of law enforcement? And on our understanding of human nature?
Well, the Lazarus case has left an indelible mark on the LAPD. It exposed vulnerabilities within the department, raised questions about their ability to police their own, and forced them to confront the uncomfortable reality that even those sworn to uphold the law can succumb to their own demons. This case, along with other high-profile incidents of police misconduct, has eroded public trust in law enforcement, leading to calls for greater accountability and transparency within the institution.
It's a reminder that no institution is immune to corruption. And that even those in positions of power must be held accountable for their actions.
Absolutely.
What about the broader implications of this case for our understanding of human nature?
Well, the Lazarus case serves as a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that even those we perceive as upstanding citizens can be capable of great darkness. It compels us to confront the complexities of human motivation, to acknowledge that the line between good and evil is often blurred, and to recognize that everyone is capable of both great and terrible things.
It's a sobering thought that challenges our assumptions about human nature.
It is.
And reminds us that we can never truly know what lies beneath the surface.
That's true.
So as we conclude our discussion of this case, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this story?
Well, I hope it encourages a deeper reflection on the complexities of human behavior, the enduring mysteries that often surround criminal cases, and the importance of critical thinking and skepticism. When navigating the world of information, we can't always neatly categorize individuals as purely good or evil. Instead, we must embrace the nuances and contradictions that shape our actions and choices, acknowledging that even those in positions of authority are capable of both great and terrible things.
Those are some powerful words to reflect on.
I hope so.
And as always, we encourage you, our listener, to continue exploring this case, to delve deeper into the evidence, the testimonies, the unanswered questions.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes the most profound insights lie hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered. It's true. This case makes you think about how we really just never know what's going on behind closed doors, or the lengths someone will go to hide their secrets. I mean, the Lazarus case really shatters that idea we have, that cops are always trustworthy and safe.
Absolutely.
It just leaves us with so many questions.
It does, and some of those questions might never be fully answered. We might never know for certain what caused this to happen. Was it just like a sudden burst of rage, or a carefully thought out revenge plan, or something else completely? It's hard to say. Even with forensic evidence, it's not always clear.
It's a reminder that every crime has a human story behind it. A whole messy web of emotions and reasons that can be hard to figure out.
And we always want easy answers.
Yeah, we do.
But often it's way more complicated than that.
So what are some of the things that might have led Stephanie Lazarus to do this?
Well, the prosecution said jealousy and feeling betrayed were probably big factors. I mean, Lazarus was clearly really hurt and angry that John Rutten decided to marry Sherry. And her diary entries showed a lot about how she was feeling back then.
Those diary entries were really bad for her case.
Yeah, for sure.
It seemed like she was obsessed with Sherry, even confronting her at least once.
And that confrontation tells us a lot about Lazarus, about how she couldn't just let things go. It makes you think she was possessive and couldn't handle being rejected. But of course, those are just parts of the whole story. There could have been other things going on in her head that we'll never know about.
It's like trying to put together a broken mirror. You have the pieces, but you can't get the whole picture back.
Exactly.
One thing I find interesting is John Rutten's role in all of this. He admitted to still being with Lazarus even after he proposed to Sherry. But they never even thought he might have killed her. What do you make of that?
Well, it definitely makes you wonder. I mean, there's nothing that says Rutten was involved in Sherry's death directly. But what he did was definitely part of that messed up situation that led to this tragedy. He was at least part of how it all started.
He was living a double life, basically.
Yeah, you could say that.
Juggling two relationships. And those choices ended up having really bad consequences. It just shows you that what we do affects others. And sometimes those effects can be huge.
That's true.
This whole thing really impacted everyone involved.
Absolutely.
Not just the people directly connected to the case, like the Rasmusen family and John Rutten. But the LAPD, too.
Oh, yeah. It really forced them to look at themselves, to change some of their rules and how they do things, and to focus more on being ethical and taking responsibility.
It's a classic example of how one event can show you the weak spots in a system. And force everyone to make changes.
That's right.
Do you think the LAPD learned from all this?
I think they've gotten a lot better at dealing with the problems that let this case go unsolved for so long. I think there's more awareness now about the dangers of focusing too much on one theory and the importance of investigations based on evidence and being open and honest.
Yeah.
But of course, there's always more they can do.
Right.
Getting and keeping the public's trust is an ongoing thing.
It's true. Justice isn't just about catching the bad guy.
Yep.
It's about changing the whole system.
Yeah.
Fixing the things that cause crime and bad behavior.
Yeah.
And always trying to be fair and hold people accountable.
Couldn't agree more.
Well said.
Thanks.
And in the end, it's about remembering the victims.
Yes.
And trying to prevent this kind of thing from happening again.
Absolutely.
That's a powerful message to leave our listeners with.
I hope so.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Lazarus case, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I hope this case makes them think more deeply about how complicated people are, about the mysteries that we often see in these kinds of cases, and how important it is to think critically and be skeptical about the information out there. You can't always easily say if someone is good or bad.
Right.
We have to understand the messy and contradictory parts that make up how we act and the choices we make.
Right.
Even people in power can do good and bad things.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's been an intense and thought-provoking look into all the twists and turns of this case.
It has.
We encourage you, our listener, to keep exploring this story.
Yeah.
To dig deeper and come to your own conclusions.
Absolutely.
And remember, sometimes the most important answers aren't found in a courtroom.
Right.
But in the quiet thinking you do afterward.
Yeah.